Good evening and welcome to our continuing coverage of Town Meeting 2019. Here at Channel 17, we're happy to have you, and we're going to be talking about the Winooski city budget and ballot items. And we are, a couple of them are bond items, so I've got them in there. And we have Jessie Baker, who is the city manager, and Nicole Mace, who is the mayor. So thank you both for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Lauren Glenn.
I really
Great to be
appreciate
here.
it. So we want to start, we have a presentation for the budget and ballot items, and I think it's always good to read and understand what the strategic vision is of Winooski, because you are really very much a values-driven community. So why don't we start with that?
That is correct. So a few years ago, the council decided to work with the community to be very, very clear about where it was we were hoping to get to as a city. And so the statement is up. I don't know if it's on the screen at the moment, but we're committed to being a affordable, livable, diverse community where the role of government is to foster and guide investments in economic vitality, municipal infrastructure, housing, and ensuring that we have safe, healthy, and connected people. So those four areas have really been areas that we've devoted a lot of time, attention to, and which our budget is intended to carry forward from what has been years of planning into action.
And can I just ask you just quickly, I don't want to use up your time because I know you've got a lot to say, but just say how does the budget process work, and how do you get feedback from the community about how to inform the budget and these values?
Yeah. So as Nicole said, the strategic vision really guides our work. It's the community's value. It's what we align our city work plans to. So in the fall, in October, that staff sit with the council and set some goals for our budget. We then as staff go back and develop a budget. We do that in conjunction with our commissions as well. So we have a pretty extensive commission structure where we have community voices at the table guiding how these values are reflected in our operations. We then bring a proposed budget to the council at the beginning of December. We go through a series of 6 or 7 public meetings where we really dive into the weeds of each department operations, what's in the budget, what's proposed for new initiatives, new projects, and then ultimately at the end of January, the council decides what to put forward to the voters.
Got it. So what are the high levels? What's the high level on the budget this year? I see it's maintaining.
So this budget does a number of, it's a critical budget for the city, really. We've had years of planning, as I mentioned before, and this budget both maintains current level of services and moves forward 4 large capital projects, 2 of which have been approved by the voters over the past year, our Main Street Revitalization project and the Myers Memorial Pool reconstruction, and 2 that are just critical infrastructure needs for the community, water and street improvements to Hickok Street, and a new downtown parking infrastructure that we're going to go through during the presentation.
All right.
And if I can just emphasize a little bit, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the community has spent years going through a number of planning efforts, many of which have been covered here at CCTV, from our Main Street project to our parking study, our transportation master plan, our community and economic development strategic plan. And those plans have really rolled up into this call for action. Our voters approved 2 bond votes last year, and this is the budget that enables those projects to move forward, as well as Hickok Street and our new parking garage. So I think it's really important to reflect back that the community has spent years building towards these 4 votes.
And really laying a strong foundation to make sure that if we receive approval from the voters, we're able to execute relatively quickly.
Yes.
I want to just remind folks that if you have any questions, we are at 862-3966. We'd love to hear from you. This is a good time for Winooski residents to weigh in with any questions they have on the budget or upcoming ballot items for the March 5th vote. So the Main Street Revitalization project, how is that reflected in the budget?
So this project this year in FY20 is an $155,000 engineering expense. The total cost of this project is expected to be around $23 million, and we've identified some federal sources in terms of low interest loans and grants. But this year, we need to move forward. We're in the phase of final design phase for the full project, and so that will incur about $150,000 $5,000 in expense. Just as a reminder, this bond vote was presented in May of last year, was approved with 63% approval, and at that time we were projecting about a 4 to 6% tax rate impact for that project. The annual debt cost for the engineering that we're going to incur in FY20, if we rely solely on the property tax to fund that, would be about a 3-cent increase to the tax rate. Luckily, we don't have to rely solely on property tax revenues, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But certainly the next council is really going to need to wrestle with the pace, timing, and scope of that project moving forward, so that we can, manage that $23 million cost over the course of several years.
And what's the highlights of that Main Street revitalization? What's going to be different?
Sure. So right now, the water and wastewater lines under the street are about 100 years old. We're experiencing some pretty significant water breaks along those lines. So it's a full reconstruction, subgrade up. So new water lines, wastewater lines. We're going to underground the utilities along Main Street and then improve the streetscape. So bump out the sidewalk, allow for new street trees, green space along the road, and put in some bike improvements as well.
So it's not where the circle is, it's Main Street up towards the Interstate Exchange?
Exactly. It's the mile of road between the railroad bridge right north of the Rotary to exit 16.
Got it. Okay.
The
That'd
next,
be nice to have some trees there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so trees and pools.
So the pool has been closed for a few years now. This past August, voters approved, gave us bond authorization for up to $3.8 million to support the reconstruction of this valued community asset. The estimated cost for this fiscal year is $300,000. We're excited to announce today we received a grant from the state of Vermont for close to $150,000. So we are really, as a council, been very committed to identifying sources of revenue to offset the impact on the property tax. We have a pool fundraising committee that has a goal of raising some funds to support the construction of the slide and a shade structure. So we're really excited about the prospects for moving forward this spring with construction. And this investment in the FY20 budget allows us to do that.
Excellent. And then Hickok Street water improvements, that is a bond request for this ballot.
It is. So one of the things we heard through the previous planning efforts was our neighbors really wanted us to focus on the neighborhoods as well as improving the infrastructure in our core downtown and along our gateways. So the Hickok Street area has needed some work for a long time, needed some infrastructure improvements. So this is primarily a water replacement project where we're going to replace the water lines underneath the road and then repave the road. It's focusing on one of our most important neighborhoods and doing so with no impact to the tax rate, no increased impact to the tax rate. We can fund this project solely through our water rates, our wastewater rates, and our existing debt service capacity within our general fund.
So I'm getting the impression that the infrastructure underneath Winooski needs to be replaced.
As it does across the state, yes.
Exactly. So you're planning to do it in sections as opposed to one big undertaking.
Right.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. And are you going to talk about the impact on the water rates of this?
We will
improvements?
in a few slides.
And the Abenaki Garage, talk about that.
So this is a new parking infrastructure that we're proposing for Abenaki Way. So the lot right now between CCV and River Run in our core downtown is currently used as a parking lot. This new parking infrastructure will allow us to alleviate some of the parking pressures in our current garage, therefore creating some new space, some new accessibility for our residents and visitors to park close to the downtown, the restaurant community, et cetera. It also allows us to fully develop the TIF district. So a couple of years ago, we had permitted a hotel at the bottom of the Rotary in Winooski. That ran into some legal challenges, some concern about where that was situated and how the traffic flow would work. So with this project, we will move that hotel development to lots, what we call Lot 7D, the corner of Winooski Falls Way and Abenaki Way. The hotel developer is on board with this. We'll then subdivide the lot. We will build our parking infrastructure on one side between CCV and the hotel, And then the hotel will go on that prominent corner at the corner of Abenaki Way and Winooski Falls Way. And we're really excited about it. We're excited to successfully wrap up the TIF district in 5 years. We're on track to do that. And that downtown master plan always envisioned a hotel in our downtown. So I think this is really bringing the community's vision for our vibrant downtown community to fruition.
And this is the last lot that the city owns in that in the TIF district, and it's currently being used for parking. So we really believe that this project maximizes the potential of that space and meets a critical need for our residents and business partners.
So those are, that's a general obligation bond.
It is, so they're both general obligation bonds, but that bond will be paid solely through the parking fees within our parking fund. So there, again, will be no impact to the taxpayers as a result of this construction.
Got it. Okay.
So when we talk about our level services budget, so this budget obviously maintains current levels of services, as we said earlier. We had some assumptions built into that that lead to increases, including a 2.8% cost of living adjustment, increases in health insurance. We also projected a modest increase in the grand list because the pace and scale of development can be difficult to predict, so we always err on the side of caution in terms of estimating new revenue generated by development, but we're anticipating about $40,000 in new property tax revenue for the general fund, which will offset the need to raise property taxes. And here's the so what does it mean to me slide. Yeah. This budget will result in a 6-cent tax rate increase for Winooski residents. When you look at a $225,000 home, that's roughly $137 a year in increase. When we talked about the Main Street project and the pool project with our community at the time that the bond votes were being presented, we had estimated somewhere between I think 8 or 11 and 17-cent tax rate impact for those projects. How did we get to 6 cents with funding both of those projects and maintaining without cutting operations? That is because we've identified some new revenues to offset the tax rate impact. So council was really clear with the community that in order to move forward with some of these major infrastructure projects, that we were going to be pursuing every possible avenue to offset the impact on the property tax. So one option that we are presenting to the voters that they will need to approve on town meeting day is the local option sales tax and a local option rooms, meals, and alcohol tax.
And that's something that Burlington has.
Yes.
Yes.
And Williston has.
Yes. Most other surrounding communities have those.
Okay.
So we are essentially an outlier at the moment because we do not collect a local option sales tax. We've worked with the business community and they seem on board with this as a way to ensure that, Winooski is a destination for many Vermonters and non-Vermonters. And if we're going to be investing in our water, sewer, and road infrastructure, that this is a good way to ensure that those visitors contribute to those costs as well.
So that slide, could you bring that slide up again, Kevin? There's a lot of information on that slide, and it's a little hard to read. So what's the most important part on this slide, Jessie, that people should be looking at?
So I think the most important thing to think about when we're considering the local options tax is it really is a way to diversify our revenue streams, to bring revenue into the city that's not solely property tax revenue, not solely our residents. But as Nicole said, as we become a destination, how do our visitors contribute to that infrastructure that they're walking over, driving over, parking in, et cetera? I think it's really important to note that Winooski right now is in a donut hole. We are surrounded by other communities that already benefit from this diversified revenue stream. So how do we capitalize on that and bring those revenues into the city? The council has been very clear that these new revenues, we're projecting about $277,000 in the first year collected, go solely to capital. So we're not tapping that revenue resource to pay for operations. It's solely going to our increased cost for Main Street and the pool.
So the sales tax is projected to raise $144,000, and the rooms and meals and alcohol is projected to raise about $133,000.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think it's important to note that the sales tax does not apply to essential items like food, clothing, medical items, shoes, etc. That was also really important.
Well, you can't buy those things in Winooski, can you?
Well, you can buy a few things.
Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, Winooski
Yeah.
is primarily rooms and meals and
We have some
A
clothing
destination
stores that are
place.
pretty fantastic. Yes, yes,
Well,
we
that's good to
do.
know. Okay,
Yes, we
I stand
do.
corrected.
The block building.
Yeah, and it's actually projected that the sales tax will bring in more revenue than the rooms, meals, and alcohol tax. That's what the state data shows us.
Because we don't have a hotel yet.
We don't have a hotel yet.
Are you going to have a supermarket soon?
Well, we have commodities in our downtown, so we've achieved that for the downtown. I think from a large-scale supermarket perspective, the market is very hard to make work in Winooski because Shaw's is,
Right
you know, an eighth of a mile from our border.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
So in terms of the water projects, we have identified new revenue through increases to the water and sewer rates. So we're presenting a 2.5%, we've approved actually as council, 2.5% increase to the water rate and a 3% increase to the sewer rate. Taken together, that'll have a collective impact of around $32 a year in an increase. If we go to the next slide, you'll see, again, it's a little hard to read, but you can see our rate history for water and wastewater rates have not increased those rates since 2012. And even with these increases, we're about in the middle of the pack in terms of our neighboring communities. This council, if you can see the chart, you'll see some years we had an 18%, 19% increase, and then years of no increase. So I think the attitude now is the better approach to ensure we're putting money aside for these these infrastructure needs that we now have a plan to address, that we would see regular, moderate increases on an annual basis rather than nothing for years and then a spike.
Got it. Okay. And you're not part of the Champlain Water District, or are you?
We are, yes.
And so how do these water rates tie into the Champlain Water District?
So the communities that are part of the Champlain Water District buy wholesale water from the district, and then we operate the distribution system. So we buy the water, then we manage the pipes under the streets. We manage, obviously, the wastewater treatment plant where the water ultimately goes. And the rates we charge cover both our wholesale purchase cost as well as our operation and capital cost to run the distribution system.
Are you seeing any increases from them for the cost of what they provide?
They've made a small increase this year, but again, along the lines of Nicole, as Nicole was just saying, in order to stay up to date and sustainable with the cost of operations.
So a household's looking at a combined property tax and water rate tax of about $170,000, give or take, if their house is worth about $250.
$170.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Great. So you've got this slide here, past tax rate increases are lower than inflation.
Yeah, so this is just to, I think most Winooski voters will see a 6% increase and say, well, that's higher than we've seen. And so we just wanted to remind folks that this was intentional. So for the past 5 years, council and the city manager's office worked really hard to hold the line on increases in spending and really try to keep them at or below inflation. And as I said earlier, the water and wastewater rates have not increased since 2012 because we knew we were coming into these critical infrastructure needs and that we would need to be asking our taxpayers to support these investments. So all of that is intended to, again, we're excited about the fact that we were able to present this budget with a 6% increase and move forward with Main Street and the pool and maintain high levels of service to our residents. I think when we thought about a potential 11 to 18% increase to fund just Main Street and the pool, to be able to come back to our voters and say the final budget in this slide has more detail in terms of the split, but when you break out the 6 cents, 2.4% of that is for operations, and then the remainder is for Main Street and the pool. So kudos to Jessie and her team for really being thoughtful and creative about ways to diversify the revenue to make sure we can actually move forward on the projects, but not place the entire burden for doing so on the property tax.
So for folks who might have just joined us, Jessie, would you just do a recap for us?
Sure. So this, the budget items, the 4 different ballot items we will be asking the voters to vote on town meeting day, really bring to fruition what we've already heard from them. They want Main Street to be revitalized. They want the pool to be reconstructed. They want us to invest in our neighborhood infrastructure, and they want us to successfully wrap up our TIF district. This budget, while a 6% increase, a 6-cent property tax increase, as you said, $170 impact for the average property tax paying family over the year, really lets us get to that place where we can implement. We've been talking and planning and talking about community values and visioning for our community for many years. This lets us put shovels in the ground and get these things to fruition for our residents and our neighbors.
All right, Olive, would you like to come and remind everybody when to come and vote?
Can I just say one thing? This
Yeah.
last slide talks about the 4 questions that will be on the ballot box.
Great.
The first is to approve the amount to be raised by property taxes. The second is to approve the bond vote for Hickok Street. The third is the bond vote for the Abenaki Garage. And the fourth is a 1% local option tax on sales and rooms, meals, and alcohol. We need 4 yes votes in order to move forward with this community vision. For example, if the local option sales tax fails, then we really need to rethink the entire budget because so much of what is included in the budget relies on that additional revenue moving forward. So really appreciate the opportunity. It's a complicated budget. The pieces fit together like a puzzle, and so we're hopeful that we do see 4 yes votes when folks come to vote. And when do they do that, Olive?
Tuesday, March 5th, 2019, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. At the Senior Center.
At the Senior Center, that's right. And we can't say vote early and often, but we do want you to come and vote. And not to forget that Election Day, Town Meeting Day, is March 5th. So thanks so much for watching, and thank you so much for presenting the Winooski budget and ballot items. Jessie Baker and Nicole Mace. Jessie Baker is the city manager, Nicole Mace is the mayor of Winooski, and Olive is our co-host here. So thank you
That's
so
right.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
Lauren
you,
Glenn.
Lauren Glenn.